My dear brother, Albert Muchanga, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to New York. I know that you are in New York for the General Assembly.
Yes.
As you know, I have been trying to have this conversation interview in the past couple of months. Mm-hmm. And the purpose of this conversation is to amplify African voices in the New York stage. Yes. Everybody knows that the New York stage is where global narratives, as I used to say, are cooked. And we need to amplify African voices so African perspectives are duly factored in, and Africa, little by little, starts playing its entitled global player role.
Okay.
I have 3 questions for this conversation. If you allow me, I would like to start with the first one.
Okay, go ahead.
The first one is about financing for development. We have been talking a lot, me and you. Every time we meet, we discuss about financing for development. And we have been discussing that basically Africa is in a paradox situation. Africa is rich in financial resources. I'm not saying natural resources. I'm saying financial resources. $88 billion in illicit financial flows. But according to the most recent calculation of my team, Africa loses $500 billion annually.
Okay.
At the same time, Africa sometimes is begging for ODA. This pushes us to put domestic resource mobilization at the driver's seat. Yes. I know that you have been doing an outstanding job in helping African countries build strong domestic resource mobilization. Yes. Please tell us what the African Union Commission has been doing.
Thank you very much, my sister Cristina. I'm very, very happy to be with you for this discussion. Indeed, the question of domestic resource mobilization is pertinent. Because when you are talking with the policymakers, policy advisors, policy implementers, both from Africa and the rest of the world, and they have an interest in Africa, they are going to tell you very, very, very clearly that Africa is a net creditor to the world, when it's supposed to be a net recipient of resources from the rest of the world. The outflows are many. At the domestic level, there's a tax evasion. At the intercontinental level, there's a tax evasion. Similarly, when it comes to issues of multinational corporations, there's some element of tax evasion. So, following on that, and you know the history.
Yes.
The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and ourselves commissioned a study on illicit financial flows from Africa under the chairmanship of the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. Under the basis of that, we have come up with a number of program activities to give it operational content. One of them has been the establishment of the African Tax Administration Forum. It's headquartered in South Africa. We are working with them really to look at the issue of developing a tax strategy for Africa, and also coming up with another strategy on how to eliminate illicit financial flows. And part of that is exchange of information. When there's exchange of information between African countries and foreign governments, they are able to get information on the illicit financial flows that have been going out, and it's able to come back to Africa. So far, because it has just started, it's about $3.8 billion which has come back. But that's just the beginning. As we go forward, we are going to have more funds coming up. The next activity is the issue of strengthening domestic tax administrations. They need to ensure that they are able to collect domestic revenues. Because even at the national level, there are some people who do not want to pay taxes. It's normal. They don't want to pay taxes. And some of the administrations can be corrupted. Let's not hide that fact. So if you strengthen that process, then you are put in a situation where the tax administrations are able to collect the taxes that are due to the government. Then the governments also have an obligation. We are talking to the governments to that as you collect the funds from whatever source to go as a fiscal revenue, there should be transparency in expenditure. Let the people see the impact of the expenditures. Let the people feel the positive impact of those expenditures. Because there's no use in collecting money when it is misapplied and the people do not feel the impact. So these are some of the issues that we are dealing in to ensure that we mobilize more resources. Then as we go towards climate change, the fact of the matter is that GDP per capita for each African will lose about 5 to 15% as a result of climate change. But there is a low-hanging fruit, and those are carbon credits. If we are able to negotiate very effectively, we should be able to receive annually $2 billion in carbon credits, because the forests that we have across Africa are very, very, very formidable carbon sinks. And Africa is not a major emitter of carbon dioxide. The emissions come from other parts of the world. So the carbon credits is one low-hanging fruit where we need to move with the agents so that we are able to negotiate and be able to get good offers of money to ensure that we really get money. And when you add all these, and the last one is tax incentives. When Africans want to interest foreign investors to come, we give them tax incentives. The African Tax Administration Forum and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa have come up with calculations that tax incentives alone cost the continent about $220 billion. You add all those, I think that's why you find the figure, $500 billion.
Exactly. I did the figure,
yes,
and you present the calculation.
Yes.
So you work well, very together very well.
Yes.
I did the figure, and you presented.
Yes.
You mentioned illicit financial flows.
Yes.
So losing money from the revenue side of the budget.
Yes.
Essentially, for example, we know, according to a UNCTAD report published in 2020.
Yes.
88 billion,
yes,
as you mentioned,
yes,
but 60 billion out of the 88 billion is trade mispricing.
Yes, mispricing.
So customs mismanagement.
Yes, and tax administration need
on the revenue side of the budget.
Yes.
You mentioned inefficient public spending.
Yes.
So there is a need to increase the quality of public spending enough. So we are losing money.
Yes.
You mentioned carbon markets. So you mentioned all the main items in these 500 billion.
Yes.
In our narrative, my dear brother Muchanga, in our narrative, in Moses' narrative, we have been saying, if Africa loses $500 billion, it's because Africa has been able to generate 500 billion. Because we cannot lose something that you don't have it. It's impossible.
Yes.
So Africa has demonstrated the capacity to generate economic and financial flows, but the inability to mobilize them. We strongly believe that the missing piece are weak country systems.
Yes.
You mentioned tax administration,
Yes.
customs administration. How and what the African Union Commission has been doing to support African countries creating strong country systems so Africa can retain the wealth that Africa creates?
Well, the first issue is sensitization. We needed to sensitize the administrations across Africa that the old way of aid dependence has not been able to generate the development that we want.
Exactly.
That is the first point. The second point is that way back in 2001, when we rolled out the new Partnership for Africa's Development, Africa made 2 voluntary commitments. The first commitment was that we are going to use NEPAD to ensure that we drive the African development process anchored on domestic resource mobilization. That was the first commitment. Then the second commitment was that we are going to use NEPAD to ensure that we end the marginalization of Africa. Now, when you look at the marginalization in the global system, you can just look at 2 figures. Share of Africa's GDP in the world economy is about 3%. Share of Africa's share in global trade is only 2.7%. Now, relate that to the share of the population, which is 18%. That's marginalization.
Exactly.
Yes, we need it to end. So, having made that sensitization now, it requires a mindset change to say we need to drive the process of development on our own. And I'm always reminding policymakers, policy implementers, and our strategists in the Commission that let us give life to commitment we made in the African Union Agenda 2063. There, we clearly spelled out that to implement the African Union Agenda 2063, 75 to 95% of the resources must be raised domestically. So, first and foremost, mindset change and self-belief that we can do it. Because if you don't believe that you can do it,
exactly.
Yeah, you not take action. But if you believe that you can do it, you're going to take action. Take the example. Let's take the example of JFK landing a person on the moon. He believed, and he did it, in spite of the fact that some of the close relatives, some of the colleagues in government, you are saying this is a dream. But says yes, it's a dream which is going to be realized.
Exactly.
Yes.
You mentioned something that is critical, my dear brother Muchanga. Mindset.
Yes.
Let me take these magic words.
Yes.
From a financing for development,
our
mindset perceives that financing for development is external driven, ODA, FDI. But when we go to the reality, we start analyzing the data. We calculated that 75% or more than 75% of Africa's development has been financed by Africa's own resources.
Yes.
So we have a reality that is already internally driven.
Yes.
But the mindset is externally driven by what to do to make this shift in paradigm from externally driven to internally driven. This is the challenge.
Yes. Well, this is where now leadership comes in.
Exactly.
That's where leadership comes in. The political leaders must stand before the population and say, we have an obligation as the current generation. Some of you are young, some of us are old, but we have an obligation to develop our society. And if we use our financial and human resources, nothing is going to stand in the way. And the focus should be on development, nothing else. Development. All the resources must be focused on development. The people who are given positions to occupy in public offices must be development-oriented. And at the end of the day, everybody should say, what have we done in the past year? If we are not satisfied, where did we go wrong? How can we do better? Focus on socio-economic development, inclusive socio-economic development. It can be done.
So, I think there is a strong call in terms of shifting from managing poverty to manage development.
And prosperity.
And prosperity.
Yes.
Which are two different elements.
Yes.
Moving to our last question.
Yes.
Import substitution strategy. We know that right after the independence, African countries had a strong agenda in terms of industrialization. Was clear, if we go to the historical documents, it's clear the role that was reserved to industrialization to drive economic transformation. Of course, the state that has been inherited, essentially tax collection and rule of law, had no profile to roll out that vision. And things didn't work very well. And Africa, differently what happened with Asia or Latin America, could not roll out a strong industrialization policy. But this was 30 years ago. Today is different. Today I feel that Africa is ready to use import substitution strategies as the low-hanging fruit from an industrialization standpoint, leveraging continental free trade area. But the global narrative doesn't like this approach. What should we do?
Well, I think first and foremost, you talked of the African continental free trade area. That's a very, very important observation. When we are talking of the African continental free trade area, what we are in essence doing is to defragment the African economies, and out of that process of defragmentation, you create one strong and large economy. As a free trade area, we are not yet there, but the eventual vision is we must move from the African continental free trade area to the African customs union / common market, and finally the African economic community with a central bank and a single currency. So that creation of a single market will be realized. And this is very, very pertinent, because when you look at international trade patterns now, a lot of people will say there's a fragmentation of the international trade system. But Africa is moving in the opposite direction by defragmenting at the regional level. Now, that becomes very, very important, because when you look at the composition of intra-African trade flows, 42% is from manufactured goods.
Exactly.
Yes. And this is very, very good, because when you look at the global trend, international trade at the global realm, 52% of international trade is made up of manufactured goods. So industrialization is going to be a key driver of development of the African continental free trade. To achieve that, we require the development of continental and regional value chains. We need to establish capability to produce intermediate goods, which can be traded across Africa, just like the final goods, manufactured goods, other agro-processed goods can be traded across Africa. And again, to do that, we need to invest in research and development. Import substitution failed because it was imitative, and we are importing materials from abroad. So when the foreign exchange ran out, everything collapsed.
Exactly.
Yes. Now, if you invest in research and development, you build internal capabilities and you build differentiation, unique African products which you can sell continentally and also abroad. So the key to that is to invest in research and development, and also to invest in industrial skills development. We should have bodies of modern factory workers, model factory supervisors, modern factory managers who are able to really ensure that the factory runs very profitably for the good of Africa.
Exactly.
So you put all these things, then you are in a situation where you can produce at source. You see, one of the reasons why you need to produce at source is we also contribute to decarbonization. Right now I have a situation where raw materials come from Africa. They are exported to the rest of the world, transformed into intermediate goods like iron and steel bars, like electric cables. They come back to Africa. Now, when you are moving them that way, the ships that are moving them are emitting carbon dioxide. Now, if you produce at source, you avoid that process. Yes. So you're contributing to decarbonization. So producing at source, I think this is the term which is now being used more popular. Because when you say import, some people get annoyed. But producing at source is now very, very, very as a part of the process of contributing to decarbonization across Africa. I mean, across the world. We reduce only carbon emissions. And it's good for the entire humanity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
A very clear and critical response. Thank you. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.